Welcome to the Boys Night Fantasy Football League Network. Or that's right, you guys are already saying it, the BNFFLN. See, we told you it would catch on. Sitting across from me is co-host Bob, and I, of course, am Weave, and this is our Week 9 edition of Stardom Situm. All right, let's get right into it. Bob, who do you have first at the quarterback position?
At the quarterback position, our start of the week is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has been having a rookie of the year type year, and he's been doing it against some of the best coaches. Against Saban, Belichick, and Carroll, he's had 14 touchdowns, and he's been averaging 438 yards. So it's not just a fluke. He's doing it against great coaches.
That's right, and he seems to have that it factor. He has great pocket awareness and the ability to throw a nice deep ball. Add that to the fact that he can move the chains with his legs, makes for a safe floor with an extremely high ceiling in any easy matchup, especially this week against the Indianapolis Colts, and that's why we say start him. As for our sit of the week at quarterback, we have Andy Dalton versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's on the road in Jacksonville against an elite pass rush. His offensive line has been anything but stellar this season, which means plenty of QB pressures and as well as the opportunity for taking a lot of sacks. His upside is just too limited at this point to be started in even a decent matchup, which he doesn't even have this week, so it's going to be tough.
Yeah, Andy Dalton, great in good matchups, bad in terrible matchups. He's hot and cold this year. He's only thrown for over 300 yards one game, and he's thrown for under 200 yards twice this year. So I think against the Jacksonville defense, that's going to be not a good week.
And that's why we're going to say sit him. As for our running back start of the week, we are going to go with Christian McCaffrey versus the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta has given up a decent amount of points to the running back position in each game so far this season. To this point, they have given up 39 receptions for over 300 yards, and that's right, 3 tutties. Tutties. Their new term this year. They'll catch on no matter how annoying they are. And that's not even factoring in the ground game. So Atlanta is just open to be exploited by a great pass-catching running back.
Mm-hmm. Christian McCaffrey, he has yet to surpass 50 yards in a single game, but that's because he's been doing most of his damage through the air. Cam Newton is looking his way a lot, and I think with the mismatch with him and the linebackers of the Falcons defense, I think he'll be able to run by them and he'll be open more often than not.
And this is, as Matt would say, it's PPR, bro. So that's why we're going to say start him.
All right, moving on. We're going to go our sit of the week at the running back position. We're going to go C.J. Anderson.
Against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, Eagles 8th best in the league against the run. And C.J. Anderson, now this is recorded. I don't know if he scores a touchdown tonight. We're recording this on Monday. But to this point of recording, he's only scored 1 touchdown on the year, so I think it's tough sledding against that Eagles defense.
Yeah, their offense in general has struggled mightily after exploding out of the gate, really, but these last few weeks, his upside's been limited. And if that wasn't enough to warrant a sit already, he's seen both his carries and on-field snap percentage drop, which in turn caps his workload further and lowers his potential fantasy output, and that's why we're going to say sit him.
Wide receivers.
Right. Moving on to wide receivers. Bob, who do you got at the stardom?
We're going with Cowboys wide receiver Dez Bryant.
Right.
Dez Bryant, he got shut down by Norman last week. Had not the best week. You kind of knew that going in, but I think he's going to have a bounce back week this week against a suspect Kansas City defense.
Yeah, the Cowboys offense relied heavily on the ground game last week in an effort to keep a more balanced attack. This week, they're going to have to lean more on the pass, especially if it holds up. Zeke's suspension, as of moments ago, he is officially suspended, so that means even more targets and pass-heavy offense. Look for Dez to see an uptick in targets, especially from Prescott, looking to rebound from last week. Big yard potential as well as red zone targets. And that's why we're going to say start him. As for our wide receiver sit of the week, we're going to go with Doug Baldwin versus the Washington Redskins. Similar to our start with Dez, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. Seattle was the opposite last week's game. They threw the ball like crazy instead of running. Therefore, they could look to dial it back for a more balanced approach, which could limit Baldwin's targets in a more managed game from Pete Carroll. He's going to want to try and keep Cousins off the field and exploit or keep Cousins from exploiting that Seattle defense that just got lit up. And so he's going to want to keep him off the field and running the ball, ticking the clock down.
Yeah, Doug Baldwin is their best target, but just like Dez last week got shut down by Norman, I see that happening again this week with Doug Baldwin, and just Russell Wilson tends to spread the ball around pretty well. So I don't think with Doug Baldwin being shattered by Josh Norman, I think he's going to look elsewhere.
No, and that's why we are going to say
Sit him.
Moving on to the tight end position. Our tight end start of the week is Jack Doyle versus the Houston Texans. Brissett has now had time to gel with this offense, and while it hasn't always resulted in wins, he has shown that he isn't afraid to throw the ball. And through 7 weeks, the recipient of a large share of those targets has been, you guessed it, Jack Doyle. So look for him to work underneath a Texans defense that just got shredded by Seattle and put up a fair amount of points.
Yeah, with the Indianapolis Colts offensive line has been terrible this year, and I think it hasn't allowed Brissett to look downfield, and that has made Jack Doyle's short intermediate routes more ideal because he has to get that ball out quick because he just doesn't have it. His offensive line is just not giving him the time, so that's why
it makes Doyle an ideal candidate, especially in this matchup, and that's why we're going to say start him.
Moving on to the sit at the tight end position, we're going Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce going up against the Cowboys. He's 10th. The Cowboys are 10th best against the tight end. I can do it. I got it.
You got it.
They've only allowed 1 touchdown on the year. So as middle of the road as the Cowboys defense is, one thing that they're decent at is defending against the tight end.
That's right. And, we were just watching the game earlier tonight. He did exit the game with an injury. We don't really know how serious that injury is yet, but that could also factor into the sit. And usually he's a must start. I mean, he's a stud. But this week's game script and matchup could be tougher for the tight end. The Chiefs seem to alternate between big weeks from their wide receiver core or their tight ends in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And since Dallas is much easier to exploit for even receivers, we think this matchup could cap Kelce's upside. And keep an eye on that injury, but that's why we're going to say sit him. Moving on to kickers, as requested. Don't worry, we're going to cover them this week.
Absolutely.
Guys.
We want to give the people what they want. So
that's right. Hey, we're hearing your feedback, and we're listening. We're doing our best.
We're working it into the lineup, yeah.
Our start of the week for kicker is Harrison Butker. That's right, Butker.
I like it.
Versus the Dallas Cowboys. So far this season, Butker has been as solid and reliable as they come. And being on a high-scoring offense that hasn't shown any signs of slowing down no matter the matchup, puts him in a great position this week for a fair amount of field goal opportunities and extra point attempts. And that's why we're going to say start him.
Sit him of the week at the kicker position. Moving right along, we're going with Brandon McManus.
We got a McManus.
We got a McManus that we're sitting down. They're going up against the Eagles. The Eagles have only allowed a kicker over 10 points once this year. And I know they're calling on Sunday for rain in Philly with kind of medium to high winds. So that's not ideal kicking conditions. So that's why
no, not at all.
Yeah. So that's why I'm gonna say that's why we're gonna say
sit him.
I'm getting used to that. I usually take the reins, so I tried it in.
Moving on to defense. Bob, who you got?
For defense, we're going the Texans against the Colts. Basically, for the whole reason we weren't really crazy about. Well, the reason we like Jack Doyle is because he needs to get the ball. Brissett needs to get the ball out quick, and that's because he has a terrible offensive line. But he can't just go to Jack Doyle all game. He's going to have to go elsewhere. But I think look for Clowney to have a good game against that offensive line. He's going to wreak havoc in the backfield, and it's going to cause turnovers.
Absolutely, and that's why we're going to say
start him.
As for our defensive sit of the week, we had a tough time with this one, but ultimately we landed on the New York Giants versus the Los Angeles Rams. The Giants find themselves going up against a surprise offense of the season in the Los Angeles Rams. Combine this with the fact that they're facing a team fresh off the bye with plenty of time to game plan for this, and this could turn into an easily lopsided matchup where the Giants defense spends way too much time on the field and therefore they're going to give up too many points, get tired out. We just don't like the matchup, so that's why we're going to say sit
Sit
them.
him.
All right, there we go. Quarterback through defense this week. Did all the positions just for you guys. That about does it for this week's edition of Stardom Situm. Stay tuned for more fantasy football talk on the BNFFLN. Thank you, and good luck in your matchups this week, guys. Bob?
We've